Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about my final thoughts going into this weekend. A couple of ones that I'm a little bit more wary of than I was earlier in the week, but at the end of the day, I'm going to stick with the picks that I made on Wednesday. Feel pretty confident in those, and frankly, early in the season like this, you're kind of throwing darts at a dartboard anyway. But let's get into my best bets for this upcoming weekend. There are a number of games that are really hard to pin down, and there's a couple of games that I feel weirdly confident about. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start with one that is going to be the main event of the weekend. I got Georgia minus 3.5 over Tennessee. This is a gut thing more than anything else. The line opened at -7 in favor of Georgia. Vegas is telling you what they thought about that game. They thought Georgia should be favored by a touchdown. Then it was bet down to 3.5. It jumped up a point, jumped back down a point, so it's kind of hanging out around that 3.5 number. I think Vegas won this one. I think they know that it probably should be around a touchdown spread, and they were hoping that people would bet this thing down. Sitting at 3.5 right now, probably the perfect spot for Vegas because people think this is going to be a field goal type game. I think Georgia's defense is a whole lot better than a lot of people think it is. I think there's a whole lot of guys, especially in that linebacker and defensive line group, that are uniquely talented individuals that will be playing on Sundays here pretty soon. I think it's going to be a nightmare for that Tennessee offensive line. I think especially without David Sanders in this game, you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to play really elite up front. You're going to have to be able to run the ball. You're going to have to be able to keep Joey Aguilar clean because he's played really good football through 2 weeks. He's been incredibly efficient, has executed that offense to near perfection. The reality is this is a entirely different game, and in the past, Joey Aguilar has made mistakes when he's been put under pressure. I think Georgia's going to be able to do that. And I do think Georgia's going to be able to score relatively early in this game. The crowd's going to be crazy. They're going to be off the charts in this football game. I don't think they're really going to be able to sink their teeth in. I don't think they're really going to be able to really set their feet and get after this Georgia team because I think Georgia has a little bit of an advantage on the lines of scrimmage. I don't think it's huge. I don't think they're going to dominate from snap 1 to snap 120. I do think they're going to have enough of an advantage here to just kind of hold Tennessee off throughout this game and get a big-time win and head back to Athens with a win they kind of need if they want to make it to the CFP. LSU minus 7.5 over Florida. I can't bet on Florida in this football game. I do not know what to think of this team. I don't know what they're going to do offensively. I tend to believe they're going to try to push the ball downfield as they often do. I don't think it's going to work out all that well. I think Mansour Delane is going to make a big play in this football game, and frankly, I do think it is a team that we've talked so much about Florida and them being disrespected and them being talked about in a negative light, and they've earned a lot of that. But on the other side, LSU didn't play their best game in week 2. Totally makes sense coming off of Clemson going into Florida, and then Clemson struggled, and a lot of people are talking down on LSU. So it is a team that has heard a lot of disrespect. Now, not nearly what Florida has heard. I totally understand that, but this is a team that wants to send a message in Death Valley at night. I think this is just a really bad situation for Florida. I think this is a solid team, a team that could turn it around if they had 1 or 2 weeks to find their feet with a little bit of a layup. They don't have that. They're going to Baton Rouge at night. It is going to be an absolute nightmare. I think that LSU defense flies around. The Florida defense getting back Caleb Banks makes me a little bit question this one, if I'm being totally honest, but I think Garrett Nussmeier puts up his best performance of 2025. I think the LSU defense makes enough plays on DJ Lagway to kind of rattle him and have him make a couple of mistakes, and LSU gets a relatively comfortable win in Baton Rouge. Notre Dame, Texas A&M under 50.5. I'm a little bit worried about this Texas A&M defense, but I'm really betting on Mike Elko to have his guys ready. I do think they're going to be able to find a way to put up enough points in this, to stop Notre Dame just enough, especially early in this game. I could very well see it being a 6-3 matchup at halftime, and then these defense kind of open it up just a little bit in the second half, but not a ton. I think Marcel Reed coming back from an injury is a little bit worrisome. Not terrible, obviously. Probably could have come back last week if they needed him, but I do think there is a reality of a guy that is so talented at running, that wants to leave the pocket, that wants to make plays with his legs, maybe just a little bit more hesitant to do that against a Notre Dame compared to some of the other opponents that A&M's had thus far. I think it's going to be a really fun one. I think it's going to be back and forth, a little bit of a stone fight, but I think these two teams are going to run the ball very aggressively. I think the two defensive fronts are going to be a little bit too much for these offensive lines to deal with, and I think this one's going to be an absolute rock fight. I do think Notre Dame wins, but I think it's something like 24-21 or 23-20 at the end of the day. New Mexico minus 14.5 versus UCLA. New Mexico is a team that I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with throughout this year. I think some people saw it just a little bit against Michigan, but Jason Eck loves to play around with trick plays. That's the way he is, and I think he understands that in a lot of these games, like this one, they're going to be physically outmatched in a lot of ways. Maybe not as aggressive as it was against Michigan, but I do think they're going to find a way to score a couple of times, and frankly, you score 14 points, that might be good enough to cover 14.5 against UCLA. So I do think New Mexico finds a way to at least keep this game close. I think Jack Lane and Scott Trey Humphrey in the backfield for the Lobos is pretty special, if I'm being totally honest with you. Jack Lane came over from Idaho. You have Scott Trey Humphrey, a very, very talented running back in the group of five, another guy in the Mountain West that is just downright special in a number of ways. I think there's going to be big plays to be had on the ground, and frankly, I don't trust Nico to not make many mistakes. I think there's going to be a couple. I don't think they're going to be entirely Nico's fault, as they haven't been in the first couple of weeks. But at the end of the day, I think there's a couple of mistakes in there. I think there's a couple of scores for New Mexico, and that should probably be enough against this UCLA team. The game tonight, Houston minus 4.5 over Colorado. I think Houston kind of wants to send a message, and I think everyone kind of does whenever Colorado comes to town. You know there's going to be eyes. You know there's going to be people watching, especially tonight when you don't really know what Colorado's going to do at quarterback. A lot of people are going to be paid attention to that one, and frankly, I think Willie Fritz wants to make a statement. I think they will make a statement. I think there's so many different things for this football team that I really like. Connor Wegman coming in very, very confident. Stephon Johnson hasn't quite gotten all the way into the mix, made one catch last week for 74 yards. I think he becomes a bigger part of the offense tonight. Tanner Koziel, very talented tight end that came over from Ball State after going to Wisconsin for a cup of coffee, essentially. And then Dean Connors, number 44 there, very talented guy. Absolutely someone that is going to be really, really tough to tackle for this Colorado football team, and we saw what that looked like against Georgia Tech in week 1. I don't think it's going to look too much better in this football game. So despite some defensive improvements, Colorado gave up nearly 430 yards per game in the first two games. It was really, really tough, especially in the ground game. I think Willie Fritz is going to be able to take advantage of that, and I think Houston gets a not necessarily fully comfortable, but enough. A 7-point, maybe 10-point win at home over Colorado, and at least has some people looking at the Cougars just a little bit differently come next week. Arkansas Ole Miss over 62.5. We talked about how weird this game is going to be. I think there's going to be points. Now, I am a little bit worried about what Austin Simmons showed last week on the road, but I think he's going to be a little bit more comfortable, and I think the big thing to watch here is Travis Williams loves to be aggressive. That's the way he calls a defense. They do an incredible job of calling the defense that way with the incredible tacklers they have all over that group, but I think Lane Kiffin's going to do enough to give Austin Simmons some quick hitters early, to Caden Lee, to some of their talented Deuce Alexander, to some of the talented guys on the outside for this football team. And then I think Kejuan Lacey is going to do enough in the run game to give them some openings on the other side of the ball. I don't think this Ole Miss defense is stopping Taylon Green. I think they really struggled at times against Kentucky last week, and frankly, I think Taylon Green's playing the best football of his entire career. I think he has the ability to put together a very, very good performance, and I really think we could be looking up 5 minutes left in the first half, and it's 21-21, and someone's driving late in the first half. I really think it's going to be a back-and-forth affair, and then I do think Arkansas is going to make a couple more plays late to win this football game, mainly because I favor the quarterback just a little bit more on the Arkansas side of the ball, but I do think this is going to be a back-and-forth football game, and frankly, I think we're going to have a really, really fun matchup in Oxford this weekend. On the other side of things, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, under 49.5. This is going to be a rock fight. Neither of these teams want to air the ball out. Now, they will hunt a shot downfield, but I don't think there's going to be tons of openings in this football game. I think there's going to be a lot of running the football. South Carolina's offense is very much feast or famine as of right now. It's either Lenore Sellers makes great plays either downfield with his arm or making plays with his legs, or they do just about nothing. I think Vanderbilt's going to do enough defensively to keep that very interesting. And then on the other side of the ball, I don't think Vanderbilt has a massive advantage offensive line-wise. I do think they have some big bodies and some guys that can really push some guys around and at the very least keep Vanderbilt on the football, keep Vanderbilt on offense, and make sure that they continue to pick up 3rd down and 3s, 3rd down and 2s, and just continue to move the chains. I think this one's going to be really weird. I think one big play totally changes this game, but frankly, I don't think that's going to come until later in the game, and I don't think it's going to be a game where you get anything more than maybe a 21-23 or a 20-17 type matchup. I think it's going to be an absolute rock fight. I think South Carolina is going to eke out with a win, but I think it's entirely a total toss-up over there in Columbia. USC minus 20.5 over Purdue. USC hasn't played anyone, so it totally makes sense that people are a little bit skeptical of the Trojans. I am a little bit skeptical of the Trojans, but I do think they're playing really good football. Jade Mayava leads the Big Ten in passing yards right now. The wide receiver core is probably the second or third best in the entire country with Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. They have the dudes, and I think Purdue's defense is going to be better, especially under Barry Odom. I don't think they have the guys to compete with a Jacoby Lane or a Mekhi Lemon on the outside. I think Lincoln Riley's going to be able to find openings with his offense. And then on the other side of the ball, I don't think USC is looking at this game, super serious, or I don't want to say super seriously, but I do think they're in a position where they cannot play their best football and still win this game. That being said, I do think this defense wants to make a statement. In their first Big Ten game, I think they want to be able to go on the road, prove that these West teams can go over to Big Ten country and really do compete. And then I think these defensive transfers want to prove that a little bit on a national stage, that they can really compete at the highest level. Obviously, Purdue is not quite the highest level, but beating them by 21 or 28 would definitely do the trick. So I'm going to pick USC to win that game by at least 20.5. I think they find a way to comfortably roll over Purdue in this football game. But a lot of different moving parts. In this week 3, it's kind of a weird in-between spot where you feel like you know these teams because you've seen two full bodies of work, but no one's really played anyone, at least the vast majority of people. So for a team like Georgia, what do you really know about them as of right now? For a team like Tennessee, you feel like you feel pretty good after that Syracuse performance. Was that enough? Was that really the team that was going to put you on a great path towards the CFP, or was that a really bad team that you found at the right time? So that's going to be a huge question, a lot of moving parts, but feel relatively confident in the picks that I have right now. We'll take our last break here. When we come back, do a little bit of a weekend catch-up. Want to talk about the AP poll discussion, want to talk about the new portal, and a couple other things we'll get into right after this, so stick with us.